and explain what we're talking about. We're going to go over a number of different topics, but today's main theme is that Bitcoin is not dead. So let me just double check that everyone can hear this. I'm not just continuing to tell myself this because I like say it all the time. It's hard when you're like repeating in your head all the time and you get really frustrated to remember like, who have I said this to? Because I keep saying this. So Bitcoin is not dead. That is the point of this talk. And if you are paying any attention to the media, you've probably heard the opposite. So we have our CBP committee today with us and special guest, Amber Scott, which I'm really excited about. Thanks for joining, Amber. I'm Jessica Levesque, C4's Executive Director. And let's start with introductions. Amber, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name's Amber Scott. I'm the founder and CEO at Outlier. We are a compliance consulting firm. So in essence, we try to keep folks out of trouble. And we have been working in the Bitcoin space and accepting payments in Bitcoin since 2013.
You've been around here for a while, so you'll be able to give us some good tips on what you've heard. How many times you've heard Bitcoin is dead? So I'm excited to hear, a little bit about that. Okay, so Dirk, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Dirk Anderson. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Salt Blockchain, and I've not been involved nearly as long as most of the folks on this call, but I am have a background in history and cryptography, which makes me kind of a goofy nut over the actual technology and the way that Bitcoin actually works. So, and Rodney says I'm not allowed to talk about cryptography on the call, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, right.
I would never do
All
that.
right. Rodney?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rodney MacInnes. I am the COO and AML Compliance Ninja at Outlier Solutions. Amber already gave an overview of Outlier, so I don't need to do that. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, Hunter?
Well, good morning. I'm Hunter Albright. I'm the founder of Work the Edge, and I help advise companies on growth strategies leveraging emerging tech. I have a background in fintech, and so spend a lot of time thinking about and working with companies on how to apply Bitcoin as well as sort of the cryptocurrency technologies in their business models.
Okay, cool. All right, so I want to do just a quick introduction about what we've been seeing in the news media and maybe some reasoning behind why this is happening to set the stage for this discussion. If you've been paying attention to the media and you hear that Bitcoin is dead, this conversation probably doesn't come as a shock to you, but also it might because you keep hearing the opposite. So why are we saying the opposite of what the mainstream media is saying? Is it just because we love crypto? Well, yes, but also we've done a lot of research. There's a lot of history behind what we're going to be saying in terms of why this isn't true. So innovation often meets opposition. Opposition is the first reaction that a lot of us have because something new is often seen as scary. So we're often told that inventions like TV, online shopping, even the computer that you're watching this on or your phone, we've been told that that's going to fail as well. And yet, here we are. Hi, you're probably watching this on a phone or on your computer, and you've been told that in the past, this wouldn't work either. So let's keep thinking about the kind of critical side of things. Just because we're told something is true, is it actually true? So when an invention faces opposition and that opposition meets purpose and perseverance, like Bitcoin, then what happens is the opposite of death, which is really what we're at this point. Bitcoin keeps surviving. So with that being said, I want to start by doing a poll from our group here, and everyone watching, I want you to do this exercise as well. Clearly, former teacher, super nerd. But what I want to do is raise your hand if you've read that Bitcoin is dead or defunct, failing, collapsing, oh God, everyone run for the hills at least one time. Okay, so keep your hand up if Bitcoin survived after the rumor was spread. All right, now keep it raised if you've heard Bitcoin was dead more than 5 times. And keep it up if Bitcoin survived. How about 20 times? 50 times? 100 times? 400 times? Probably counting. Okay, so we have all heard literally hundreds of times that Bitcoin is dead. And yet Weird. All of us work in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space. How can this be possible? So let's start by talking to Amber a little bit about your experiences, Amber. So you said you've been working in the Bitcoin field since 2013, kept your hand raised.
Yeah.
So clearly you've heard a lot of things. Will you talk to us a little bit about the first time you heard about Bitcoin maybe, and the first time you heard that Bitcoin was dead?
Sure. I think the first time that I heard about Bitcoin, I read about it in Wired. And it actually all kind of blends into the first Bitcoin transaction that I ever accepted. I'm a compliance geek, so I was very skeptical. I knew about things like Liberty Reserve and Eagle that had come before, where there were a number of actually criminal cases related to anti-money laundering, and so I was very skeptical of these types of tools. A friend of mine that I like a lot called me up and said, "Hey, can you help me update my risk assessment?" He was doing payment processing at the time. And he says, "We're doing payment processing for this Bitcoin exchange, and it's turning into a lot of our volume, and we want to incorporate Bitcoin into our assessment of risk." And I said, "Man, I've read about Bitcoin in Wired. I don't know a lot about it." And he was so enthusiastic. He was like, "It's amazing, and you have to know more about it, and it's the future, and da da da." So I was like, "Okay, well, I have to learn about it, and I'm a very hands-on learner. I have to play with something. I have to understand how it works." When we talk about most financial products that we have in the Canadian context, I use them. I'm a former banker. I've seen under the hood. I get it. I have to get Bitcoin. And so I asked if he could pay my retainer in Bitcoin. He said, "Sure, I'm going to send you some articles. You need to set up this thing called a wallet. You need to learn a little bit about security. I can't help you set up a wallet because I can't be privy to some of that information because that would mess with your whole security model. So I'm going to send you articles." This is on a Thursday. I start reading. I start relearning command line. I'm cursing. I'm hating the idea of this pseudonymous founder as someone from the traditional financial system. I'm like, "Oh, that's just ridiculous and buckets of risk, and it doesn't make any sense to me." And the more I'm digging into it, the more I'm just annoyed by a lot of the things that don't make sense, but also fascinated by some of the potential. I have a lot of friends and family that came to Canada as refugees with absolutely nothing in their pockets because things had in the refugee path, a lot of your any type of wealth you have to carry gets seized along the way. I have friends that managed to arrive with gold coins that were actually hidden inside of my friend's baby diaper at the time. So you can imagine them just extracting literal shit coins because that was the only place that didn't get searched, where they could actually transport something and arrive here with a little bit of wealth. And so the idea that you would have this money that you could essentially carry the key to in your mind in the form of this string of words was absolutely fascinating to me in terms of its potential in that regard. After not sleeping and being absolutely gross for a weekend, because as they say, I went down the rabbit hole, Monday comes, he messages me and he says, "Are you ready to receive these Bitcoins?" And I said, "Well, no, no, I have so many questions, but I have set up a wallet. I do understand some security basics. So let's go ahead and do it, because I'm not going to be ready until I've played with it." These Bitcoins come into the wallet. I start doing the work. I realize I have to transact. I have to do things. I have to play with exchanges. I have to buy something. I found a store that I could buy tablets. The price of Bitcoin shot up from $100 to $900 Canadian, by the way. So if you're watching from the US, the rates will seem wrong to you. Our dollar has a different exchange rate. Sorry, So the price shoots up. I think I'm an absolute genius. I press play and buy these tablets. I do some transactions on exchanges. The price drops rapidly after that. And I think, wow, I did these transactions at the right time. Absolute genius. Fast forward to today. One of the most common questions I get about our first Bitcoin payment is, "Whoa, that's amazing. Did you hold on to those Bitcoins? They're worth so much more now." But the week after, like within a few weeks of when I did that transaction, it was the first time that I was also encountering those Bitcoin is absolutely dead. Look at the price crash headlines. And so I think when you put it on that timeline, it's pretty absurdist.
Yeah, that made me laugh thinking about the comment about people being like, "Oh, wow, did you keep them?" Well, for those of us that have been in the space for quite a while and we've been paid in it, it is like any other currency. You can't not spend the money that you earn, whether it's in USD or CAD, because you need it to live. So same thing, if you get paid in Bitcoin or Ether or whatever it is, unless you live somewhere for free and somebody pays for all of your food and whatever, first of all, adopt me. Second of all, like,
Me too.
that's a very like niche specific situation. So I can see why people might wonder, like, why the people that have been around for a while aren't, like, you know, necessarily billionaires. But if you're using it to survive, of course, it's not just, you know, sitting there. Does anyone else have a story about the first time you heard that Bitcoin was dead, or maybe the first time you got like the large number of text messages from family and friends being like, oh my God, it's over. Like, you're never going to survive.
I remember, I mean, taking the job in, you know, the Bitcoin industry, right? And making that decision myself, but also, oh my gosh, everything that I heard from everybody. They're like, you're doing what? You're going that, you know, what are you even talking about? That's crazy. And I remember at the time that I actually accepted the job offer was Warren Buffett was on I mean, he was just going nuts against Bitcoin, right? It was like May of 2018, and he was just, you know, off the deep end about how insane you had to be to, you know, to own Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin. And I do think it's funny, right? That you said, right? I mean, if you've ever accepted Bitcoin for payment for something, obviously you've had to use it. The big difference is that, like, you get paid, you put part of your money into savings, those dollars that you put into savings, whether they're Canadian or US, don't go up in value, right? They don't, you know, they just sit there, and over time they're going to decline in value. So, you know, hopefully you saved a little bit of, you know, the Bitcoin that you get when you're paid. But yeah, the very first time I got told, I remember hearing, sorry, Rodney, that the Bitcoin was dead was as I was saying yes to a job in Bitcoin. Okay.
Oh, that must have been a fun conversation with your wife and family.
She was super supportive. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a timely one for this time of year. Everyone remembers, well, I shouldn't say everyone. Some of us will remember the run up in 2017 when the price went way up. So me being a genius investor, bought Bitcoin for some of the gift exchanges for family Christmas. That was awesome. Everybody was like fighting over it. Everybody wanted it and thought it was like really neat and thought they were going to be rich someday. And like, full disclosure, it was $30, I think, worth of Bitcoin for both of those exchanges. And, you know, at the time it was awesome. Come Christmas 2018, I am less excited about seeing my family at Christmas time, knowing that, you know, that it did settle down a little bit. The really interesting part was, you know, how do you give that Bitcoin to family? How do you help them understand it? Because I'm not going to spend, you know, more money on a wallet than I am on, you know, the Bitcoin that's being given. I don't trust anybody to keep their phone for that long without doing something silly, updating it, forgetting about it, whatever. So I made paper wallets, I laminated them, and I gave them out. And come 2018, I was expecting everyone to be like, oh yeah, I totally forgot or lost that. And none of them had, which was really neat. And still to this day, when I see them, I'll randomly ask and be like, hey, you still got your Bitcoin? They're like, oh yeah, it's here. My one uncle that got it carried it in his front pocket for months and showed it to everybody and was like, check this out. So we had to have a little chat. And so he doesn't keep it in his front pocket anymore, but he still has it. So that was a fun one. So this Christmas, for all of those who have, you know, convinced their family that, you know, it was a really good idea, be prepared for this conversation, but know that, you know, at some point in time, the narrative will shift and it will be a different conversation than you're having.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also, when you said that about the two different Christmases, I got the song Last Christmas in my head, and I started thinking, like, last Christmas, I gave you a key. Like, I'm going to come up with additional words for that. Okay, so let's hear, anybody else have a story about it? I guess everyone went, but Hunter, do you want to talk about when you first heard about Bitcoin and like how soon after you heard it's dead?
No, well, my story has similar timings to Rodney's. So in the latter half of 2017, I convinced the University of Colorado Boulder to launch a brand new course on introduction to blockchain and Bitcoin. So the course was launching January of 2018. So we basically had the buildup and then the drop. And so, faculty are looking at me saying, what are we doing? Where is this going to go? And what I talk to people about it, I think that it illustrated it then, and it's no different now, is there is this disconnect in my mind in terms of how people view the viability of Bitcoin based on the price versus the viability of Bitcoin based on the technology. And that is really fundamental for me, because I would argue that the interest and the demand for the technology has just continued to grow. And it's been under attack. It's withstood the attack. We are getting challenged as an industry of how to make a bunch of stuff better. And I think this latest round will enhance that as opposed to jeopardize it. We got to get better at how we think about scalability. We got to get better about how we think about regulation and be proactive in how we solve these. But this Bitcoin is dead for me is this inconsistent point of view on the value of the technology versus the value of the asset and how it's traded, and feel like oftentimes people have inappropriate sort of measuring sticks with it, because we're often not talking about the denominator in terms of how we think about some of these numbers the way you would if you looked at how stocks were trading and sort of the volatility that exists in other assets.
Yeah. Dirk, did you want to jump in about that as well? I think we talked before about how you want to talk a little bit more about the protocol versus the price too, and how that relates.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already mentioned, so Bitcoin came out of, the economic turmoil of 2008 and the banking issues of 2008. And it was, like we mentioned, right? It was intended as an alternative to cash, and without getting into, the fundamentals of, what makes money or what qualifies as money. The idea behind Bitcoin was it was actually something that you could pay somebody with, right? And take out the entire middle infrastructure. But it came out of that whole 2008 thing. And I think it's worth, especially with all of the news articles and stuff right now, it's worth mentioning that like in 2008, with the exception of the people who bought into Bitcoin really early, right? The newspapers didn't say that cash is dead, right? They didn't say the dollar is dead, right? They attacked the actual issues, right? The banking issues and the real estate investment issues and the things that had caused the financial turmoil, right? And so it always kind of cracks me up that people look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a set of technologies put together into this, blockchain protocol that allows for you to transfer information in a way that is secure and unreversible, right? And so the goal of Bitcoin, it can't be dead. There's nothing there to die, right? Now we see the value fluctuate like any asset. Right, you throw something that has any sort of value into the marketplace, and people are going to invest in it, right? Whether it's gold, and they're going to look at it, especially early on, when there is volatility, as a way to potentially make lots of money really, really fast. But that's not ultimately what Bitcoin is. That's how people are using it at times. And I agree with Hunter, right? I think with everything the market's going through right now, right, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. Not just a lot of opportunity, but there's going to be a lot of pressure to make things better, because what happened is what we're seeing is that a lot of people did exactly the same thing with Bitcoin that they were doing with bundled real estate in 2008. So there will always be those sorts of things, and that's why I think it's really important. And I'm so excited to have Amber in addition to Rodney on the call today, because we're definitely going to see, I think, a push to having better transparency and better understanding of where things are and what's going on. But Bitcoin as a protocol, there's nothing there actually to die as long as people are willing to use it. So.
Yeah. Amber, go ahead. Do you want to jump in?
No, I just think that was incredibly well said.
Dirk's a rock star. That's why he's our committee chair. Oh, humble Dirk. All right. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about our experiences in terms of seeing this. We've talked about the difference between the price collapse and a protocol that is not collapsing. Even as the price goes down, it still exists. It's not broken. It works. It's alive. But what we're talking about today also is the information that's being shared with us publicly by news media. So in 2017, because we've been talking about that time period a little bit, and that was 5 years ago, Bitcoin was declared dead, that the actual word dead about Bitcoin 124 times. And I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone that directs you to this site called 99 Bitcoins, and it's about Bitcoin obituaries. So it tracks all of the times that Bitcoin has been declared dead. And this is just that. There's a specific definition on that site, but this is including all the other things that have been said to try to negate the usefulness of Bitcoin. But so in 2017, 124 times we heard this. And this is not being said when we say news media. We're not just talking about like some guy on Twitter with 7 followers who's just like, Bitcoin is dead. Okay. And we're like, should we believe this guy with 7 followers? I don't know. These are huge news companies that are sharing this misinformation with people like you, like us. So does anyone want to give some examples of the news media that have said this? Maybe some of the things that they've said. Anyone want to start?
I will, but I'll preface that with saying that I have tremendous respect for the news media, and I think they have a really hard job because they have to communicate information in a way that's accessible to the general public, which is hard when you're talking about a topic that's incredibly technical. And then on top of that, they are, trying to understand it themselves and trying to parse that themselves, and it's easy to get bad advice or to be informed by someone that seems to be an expert in a particular topic and ends up, it ends up being a bad take, and that happens. The other bit about it is that when we're talking about anything financial, people have really strong opinions about new products and about the way that things are. And I can remember the first time that I talked about regulation in a securities related forum. And by the way, dealers in virtual currency are regulated as securities dealers in Canada at this point. But I remember talking about it in this forum and having someone come up to me afterwards and just saying, young woman, I've been in this industry for X number of years, and the market cap on all of this thing is so small that no one cares about it and no one's going to care about it. And I can't see anyone caring about it in the foreseeable future. Weirdly, he still gave me his card. I'm not sure what follow-up conversation he thought was going to happen, but I went ahead and didn't follow up. But he was very strong in that opinion. And if he talked to a reporter, I'm sure they would have reported that opinion as he stated it, and it would have seemed incredibly legitimate. And also he was wrong. So I think the other thing that I wanted to say is that I do have a word of caution about attributing malice in some of these circumstances because no one gets it right all the time.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? I mean, the newspapers and all these news outlets, right? I mean, they don't, they're reporting on what they hear, right? On what people are saying. And, like I said, Warren Buffett going off, right? I mean, there were it's Warren Buffett. How many newspapers picked up that headline, right? And a lot of those headlines, right? A lot of that comes from, where are they going to go? they're going to go to the traditional to TradFi, right? To the banks and the traditional finance industry, right? And say, what do you think of this Bitcoin thing? And it's a disruptive technology. It threatens the way that they do business. What do you think they're going to say about it, right? They're not going to be like, with the exception of some folks like Hunter, who was like, oh, hey, this is kind of cool. This might actually be useful, right? They're not gonna, for the majority say that, and that's what's going to get reported on, right?
I think there's another side of, what people ingest as far as news. And a lot of that, we don't really call it news as much anymore. We call it media. And what's going to get you a lot of clicks? Well, this new Bitcoin thing that you heard of, saying it's dead probably gets some attention. Doing something controversial and then posting it on Twitter that's anti-Bitcoin will get you like 10,000 people instantly, retweeting it or like quoting it and stuff like that. That's going to get massive amounts of reach. And so there's also kind of an understanding that controversial stuff is going to get more people to read it. And I mean, posting the Bitcoin white paper link and saying Bitcoin is dead are going to get a very different portion of or amount of people that are going to read or follow that link. And this is part of that, of some of the, Bitcoin is a scam, Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme. All of those are much more intriguing than here's this really new technology that could fundamentally change a lot of the things that you're used to, which is terrifying. And people may even read it, but are are going to be very resistant to change, because change is hard.
Yeah, I think doom and gloom can sell because it's that like flashy headline, fear sells. And one of the things that I think is interesting is, news sites in some ways, they're posting opinions. It's people's opinions. They're posting quotes from people who maybe have a big reach, but their thought, like something, if Jamie Dimon says something about Bitcoin, it is his opinion, right? And it might be spread all around, but that is, again, his opinion. And when we look at like Bloomberg has said in 2017 that Bitcoin was, hold on, I wrote this down, an implausible currency. And then they also published something recently about how it's a decentralized Ponzi scheme, again, pulling from what somebody else said into their article. So if you look at that, you might think, all right, Bloomberg is saying this and this, Bloomberg is a trusted source, I shouldn't believe in Bitcoin. Then you think, oh, wait, Jessica went to a conference this fall when the price had dropped and met multiple people from Bloomberg who were at this conference to learn, and they were not shitting all over it. They were like, yeah, Bitcoin's, interesting. Let's learn about digital assets. Like the people I talked to were nice and interested in it. So if we pull back and we put on our skepticism goggles, I guess, we can look at things in a different way than just what's like pushed in our face right away in the media. We just have to like think a little bit, which I get is hard to do because there's so much FUD out there that it is scary. Anything new is scary. And so it's about weeding our way through this information, figuring out what's accurate and what isn't accurate, and not just trusting anyone. Don't trust us. Do research, look into it, prove to yourself that the protocol works and it hasn't gone down. Don't just say like, oh, well, Rodney said this, so it's got to be right. Or Bloomberg said this, so it's got to be right. Go and look for multiple sources so that you know if what you're saying or reading is true or not. And I think that takes us to talking a little bit about fact checking and how do we know if what we're reading is accurate or BS? How do we know if everything on this call that's been said has been a load of crap or not? Like, how do you as a viewer know if we're just a bunch of rando people that are like, hey, let's get together and make up a bunch of nonsense? So does anyone want to talk about how people that are reading information are able to kind of do research to figure out if it's accurate or not? Like, where do you go to really see what the truth is?
C4.
So I think yes. I think one of my favorite quotes from Satoshi Nakamoto was there was a point where they said, if you don't get it, I don't have time to explain it to you. But I almost see that as kind of a paraphrase of don't trust, verify. So the idea that there isn't just this single source of truth. You have to play with things. You have to take a look at what's actually happening. You have to look at, what is this source of thing? What is the source of information? Does it make sense? What happens when I play with this thing? Does it work? I read that Bitcoin was dead last week. I also accepted my last Bitcoin payment last week, and it worked just fine. And I can look up and see what the hash rate is. I can see that miners around the world are working. I can see that there's network activity. And so I think one of the beautiful things about the nature of Bitcoin as being an open network that's open source, that's decentralized, is that you can just go and verify a lot of this information. You don't have to rely on an expert to the extent that of your ability. You can play with it. You can check on things. You can look at data in real time.
Yeah,
How?
and not to.
Will somebody explain how we do that? Not to put anyone on the spot, but I feel like if you're listening and you have heard, oh my God, what a cute little teacup, Amber. That's adorable. Sorry, ADHD. Okay, but so if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I'm hearing that we can check this. How does someone actually do it? Does anyone here have any advice for people who are hearing this and maybe aren't that familiar with the technology and aren't sure how to really do their own, I don't know, spy work into the system?
So I'll offer one thing, right? That's kind of down that direction. It's not like, hey, I mean, yeah, the whole point is you can't just say, well, here's another source, right? I mean, because that source could be faulty as well, right? Unfortunately, and not to indict the entire education system, especially with a teacher on the call, but we don't generally get taught to think critically, right? We get taught to memorize stuff, right? And regurgitate what we memorized. And so it's really easy, right? When you look at, say, a news story that says, hey, Bitcoin's dead because of this, right? One of the things, I think one of the best ways to approach, analysis of anything, whether it's about Bitcoin or anything else, is that stories tend to almost always kind of be based on a single point, right? So Bitcoin is dead is almost always about the price. It's almost always about the price. Now, maybe right now it's also about failing businesses, right? Which are driving down the price. But you have to stop and ask yourself, what are the other things at play here, right? And that sometimes takes a little bit of effort, right? Especially if it's a field or an area that you're not super familiar with, right? But looking at, asking yourself, what is the market cap, right? Who is using it? I mean, at the same time that it's being declared dead, right? It's Fidelity's rolling out a whole Bitcoin bank business, right? So looking at things from different perspectives, looking at at other potential measures or ways of evaluating something, rather than, like I said, whether that's Bitcoin or politics or anything else, right? Being able to stop. And so it's not just a matter of, well, look at a source that says something different, right, and try and evaluate for yourself, but actually look at it from different ways.
Yeah, Hunter, do you want to comment on the teacher part, or do you want me to? Because we're both educators, and I have thoughts on that, and my thoughts are not in disagreement with you, Dirk. But do you want to go first, Hunter?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I actually think this is a point where we as an industry have to lean in, because when I look at this, education cannot be underestimated, because I look at education as being a way of mitigating risk. And everybody is looking at Bitcoin and they are either choosing to maybe be negative on it or not adopt it because of their perceived risk around it. And I think we have to own that has to be overcome to get more people comfortable participating in it and however they want to participate. So, I mean, a quick question, how many people carry cash in their wallet today, just on this panel? I don't have any cash in my wallet. I have a $20 bill in my car. And
only if somebody gave me some, and then it sits in my wallet forever because I never take it out and use it.
And the only coins that really matter to me is the quarter that I use to get a cart at Aldi. That's the one actual physical piece of money that I'm always aware if I have or not. Other than that, I couldn't tell you.
Because I bring that up because I've been in payments for over 20 years. And like when we would tell people that we would go cashless, nobody believed us. And the amount of education and resistance that we had to overcome to get merchants to accept credit cards, to get people to move away from check writing. I mean, as a society, we've gone through all these major changes, and this is just a different technological change with some additional benefits, I would argue, over the other technologies, but it's still the same shift. So now, with credit cards in particular, there was an advantage of how they got marketed because we could give people credit, right? So that was an attractive to help overcome some of that risk for trying. I think with Bitcoin, I pick up on Amber's point, we've got some great ways we can show people the technology in terms of how they can decrease their transaction risk by letting them participate and learn by doing. But we've got other risks in the industry that we have to help educate people about and make it transparent and make it more user-friendly. And so I think, at least in my mind, we are getting to a point as an industry, we're having to sort of solve some of the challenges around the core technology to both improve understanding and decrease risk from a number of different perspectives.
I recently helped someone set up their first hardware wallet because they see all the news of companies collapsing and message me like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And yeah, it's that piece. I've been telling you for a long time that you should self-custody. You should take that off an exchange and you'll feel more comfortable about it. And then you don't have to worry. And it was really funny because we went through the process. I just sat there and watched him. I didn't really do much of anything. I provided very little guidance. And when it was done, he was like, that was way easier than I thought it was going to be. I was terrified. And that wasn't extremely simple or anything, but it wasn't extremely complex. I feel much better. And I think that's, the catch-22 of education, where yes, we should be teaching people a lot of, how to do this themselves and things like that. But also, we need to educate people that it's not rocket science. I mean, how many people on this call can describe how the internet works? Probably most of us, but that's not the average person.
Probably
so
not me. I don't know. I feel like you're jumping to a conclusion there. I don't know if I could explain it well.
I said most of us, Jessica.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure.
And so there's that piece of, having someone come to your house and hook your internet up is perfectly fine. You don't need to understand how it works. But Bitcoin is a little different, where you don't really have the ability to have someone else do all of the work for you. And so it's that education piece of helping people understand that while it's your responsibility, it's not rocket science. It's it is a little complex. And so the education isn't, people need to understand exactly everything about how all of the Bitcoin functions. They need to understand what a private key is. They need to understand what a wallet address looks like, what your public and private key differences are, and some of the basic stuff. We go to a lot of detail in the CBP because you're trying to certify to be a Bitcoin professional that goes beyond just what the average user needs. And so I think a big part of that education is helping people understand that there's a low barrier to entry as far as the information you need to understand to secure your own Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, how many people on this call besides Hunter can tell you how many tracks there are on the magnetic stripe on the back of your credit card?
I bet Amber can. No?
Because you don't need to know that there's 3 tracks. You don't need to know what's in those 3 tracks. None of that is necessary. So yeah, I think that's, people get like scared by like the word crypto, I think, in cryptocurrency sometimes, because they think that they're going to have to understand all this complex mathematics or the cryptography behind it. And it's great if you can, when you're talking about sources, right? If you can go and read the Bitcoin white paper, which is, absolute elegance, because what it does in 8 pages is, always just blows me away. The first time I read it, I was just like, the first time I read it, I was like, wait a minute, I need to read that again. And then I was like, wow, that's really cool. But not everybody's going to get that, right? Not everybody's, and that's fine. Not everybody just has the background. Not everybody cares about that, right? But yeah, the ability to use something, there are fundamentals you need to understand, but not all of the details, any more than using your credit card, or any more than understanding how a micro reader read the numbers on your check and processed it and where it went, and you just needed to know how to write out the check, right? So each technology has those things that nobody has to understand. And but everybody, once you start using it, once you get comfortable using it, you don't think about those things anymore. And so then when something new comes along, you're terrified of all those things again.
I did a fun search when you were talking about, don't just go to C4 and believe, and don't just go to this other website and believe, and compare the two. They could be, cahooting together. I went to Google Scholar and I typed in Bitcoin and hit search, and it returned 248,000 results in 0.03 seconds, which is pretty awesome because that's a lot of information that exists now. Then I did one for currency and did the same search, and it returned 4.8 million in roughly the same amount of time. So while there's not a plethora of information, there is way, way more information than you're going to have time to read. So you should be able to find multiple reference points to anything that you're looking for without trusting, a single point of information, unless that single point of information is Dirk, but in that case, you're fine.
I really like those stats and kind of showing how quick you can look up information, find it, and then of course the process of going through and kind of seeing what's real or not. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical. There's nothing wrong with reading articles that are saying the opposite of what we're saying. There's nothing wrong with reading articles that are saying what we're saying. The piece, and Amber, you pointed on this earlier, is the critical thinking of it. And I think Hunter, you said this as well. As educators, we often are confronted with the reality that many people don't think critically. And I'm guilty of this too. I think we all are. Sometimes we don't want to spend the extra brain power to get the answer. I remember when I was teaching a college class, a student did not turn their paper in. When I talked to them about it, their reason for not turning it in, and this was quite a while ago, so it involves printing, but was because they couldn't figure out how to get the printer to work and they were too frustrated and gave up. So they literally had completed their entire project, and then rather than finding a solution, they just didn't turn it in. And so I literally went with them afterwards to a computer lab, and they had done it. This wasn't just like one of those, the dog ate my homework. It was not being able to process those next steps. And so I think as humans, sometimes we just like go with the flow. We believe what we just kind of give up on it. And very few people, when you first heard about this, you did a lot of research. You did all of this reading on it, but not everybody does that. And so that's kind of an important piece that maybe we're missing out on.
Well, and I also think we're in, when you're early days in an emerging technology, it is a challenging time because especially one with Bitcoin where people have the perception of being able to get rich quickly. And therefore, there are going to be people that are going to take advantage of that. And so without a more uniform understanding of what it is and what it isn't, why it works and why it doesn't work, where it's well positioned, where it's not well positioned, we're going to have incidents where people get taken advantage of. And I think the point about trust, or sort of trust but verify, is really important. There's Roger Martin, who is a sort of a strategist and an academic out of Canada, talks about there's two types of thinking. One is being reflexive, and the other one is being reflective. And that's a really important distinction. Like we are being trained to be more reflexive in terms of how we voice opinions and how we think about things, because it's what we hear in our sort of tight circles of people that think in a similar way to us. But I think we should all be challenging ourselves to be more reflective about, okay, well, if Bitcoin's dead, what would have to be true for Bitcoin to be dead? we'd have to see the number of users going down. We'd have to see the number of miners dropping off. We'd have to see the number of transactions going down. We'd have to see less investment dollars going into technology companies that are being built on it. And all of these things are moving in the opposite direction of being dead. Opinion pieces might be going up, and people that are getting burned from maybe sort of some unethical and unmoral activities is going up, but that's partly because the tide, the level of the water's going up all across around the globe. And so I think we all have to challenge ourselves to figure out how we can be more reflective in terms of defining it, but also then finding the information to either support or sort of disprove whatever our hypothesis might be.
That's way more eloquence around what I was trying to say earlier. Thank you, Hunter.
Yeah, likewise. That was incredible. Like, okay, totally going to be a snippet we need to release, and like might be my new phone ring.
No, I think it's interesting too, right? Because I think this gets used both ways, right? We like to, as Bitcoin supporters and crypto enthusiasts, right? We like to talk about the fact that Bitcoin's 13 years old, right? And that's how it's been around forever. You can say it's dead, but I mean, it's obviously living. Other people will be like, well, it's been around for 13 years and still nothing. But Bitcoin, from a mass adoption sort of perspective, right, has existed since late 2017, right? It was that massive bull run that first got it into all of the mainstream media and really made it something that my mom would mention, right? Versus something that I talked about with my geek friends. The technology has been around for 13 years, sure. And some people absolutely have been fanatics in adopting it. And Amber was, taking payments in it in 2013. And but for most people, and from a media perspective, which is kind of what we're talking about here, right? It really didn't exist before 2017. And that's just not that long ago, right? For adopting a new technology.
So Hunter, you talked a little bit about some of the ways we can look at the like transactions and whatnot to prove that this is still a protocol that's running, that's working. I think it'd be kind of interesting to build on that in terms of how we know that Bitcoin is like the history behind proving that it is going to continue, right? Like Dirk said, it's been 13 years, it's still going, but how do we know that tomorrow it's not going to stop? I mean, we never really know anything, but what are the indications that are giving those of us that are bullish on Bitcoin the opinion that it will continue? So like, what does that question make sense? Basically, what is it about Bitcoin that gives us this confidence that we might not have in a different currency or a different invention?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ones, and I don't have the link, maybe somebody else can pull it up and share it, but there are sites where you can look basically at the number of miners and the amount of basically CPU power that's being used, right? And that's an important thing because that's where people are investing their own money in terms of supporting the infrastructure. So I mean, we can look at the strength of the network in terms of the number of miners, the number of essentially sort of processes that are being run to support the network as a whole, in addition to then looking at the number of transactions and the number of wallets and some other sort of next level KPIs or sort of metrics that we can think about in terms of the amount of engagement with the technology that is independent of media, right? This is people actually using it to transact and to support the activities of the network. So
I'm starting to giggle ahead of time because I know, Dirk, that you're going to be like, oh, of course, because Rodney and I are always like, cryptography, Dirk. But so, Dirk, there is something called cryptography that provides this level of trust. For those of us who don't really understand cryptography that well, can you explain very, very briefly why someone who understands it more than me can trust that this is going to keep being secure?
No. No, but
Good talk.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. No, I think, yeah, so more than the cryptography though, right? I mean, because Bitcoin is made up of, yes, I mean, cryptography plays a key role in it, right? It's where cryptocurrency gets its name. It provides these mathematical algorithms that allow us to create that public key, private key sort of process where I can give you some numbers and say an account number, right? And which is really kind of just my wallet, right? And you can send money to that and know that I'm the only person who can access that money on the other side. The same way that we can send private emails, the same exact way that you can log into Amazon or some other online website and type in your credit card numbers and know that it's encrypted going across there and only going to be accessed by them on the other end, unless of course they get hacked. But I think it's that, you know, when we talk about things that were dead, right? There was a whole lot of the internet is dead once upon a time, right? And I think one of those really important measurements of the reality of that was there used to be, and there probably still is, an internet mapping site, right? And it showed you all of the active websites that were on the internet at any given time. Very similar to looking at all of the active miners that are on the network at any given time. And I think that so it's not just cryptography, right? I mean, there's some game theory in there that is the entire process around the Bitcoin protocol that makes it more lucrative to play by the rules than not, right? Than to try and subvert them in the protocol. And the more miners that are out there, right? That's a huge indicator of the trust in the system, because the more miners that are out there processing these blocks, the harder it is for anyone to abuse the system. And so I think that, yeah, the cryptography plays a piece in it. The game theory plays a piece in it. The way that there was nothing, I always say there was nothing new in the Bitcoin white paper. There was no new actual technology in there. It was the mashing together of several technologies in this new way, in this new use case to create blockchain. As a ledger that can be trusted, and the more miners that are involved, then the more it can be trusted. And so, yeah, so I think that's an excellent measure of, is it really dead or not? Because if it's really dead, then nobody's going to be wasting time mining it. So. And of course, that gets into the whole conversation of what mining actually is for people who don't know. But that's another.
Well, we have a whole video on that.
Call. Yeah.
We have a whole video on that if anyone is interested in it. So Amber, as a founder of a company that has been around for quite a few years, I'm assuming you're not closing your doors and saying, oh, I read Bitcoin's dead, this is all over. Outlier is still continuing to be a functioning company. It's still something that you believe in. And I believe that in 5 years, when we continue doing this, because I firmly believe Bitcoin's going to keep going strong, and we maybe have you on as a guest again, hopefully before then, why do you believe that this is going to keep going? Why are you not doubting this? Why, when I asked you to join this call, were you like, yeah, I completely agree that Bitcoin is not dead? And you're like, what is your kind of mentality on continuing to work in this?
So in continuing to work in this space, because it's interesting, but I think there's probably some symmetry, because we started talking about the first Bitcoin transaction that I did. And one of the last Bitcoin transactions that I did was actually to settle a cross-border payment. So there was money that was owed, and we had this big conversation of trying to figure out, how do you pay someone in Canada when you're not in Canada? And then just the easiest, quickest way that we agreed on in terms of settlement was Bitcoin. And from the time that I sent, here's the Bitcoin address where you can make the payment, I could see in seconds that the payment had been made. And I could see in minutes that it was confirmed on the blockchain. And that was awesome. That's such a different and much more transparent experience than I think we generally have in the financial world. And so as long as it continues to be useful, as long as it continues to be interesting, and I don't see either of those things going away, I will be here.
And I want to build on Amber's comment real quickly with, I just pulled up two fun facts. So first of all, Bitcoin's not going to go away because there's still a real need and problem that's being solved. And I'm going to illustrate this with two things. One, Ukraine now ranks second in the world in terms of use of Bitcoin. Over $100 million has been donated to Ukraine through Bitcoin. There is a need. It's cross-border payments. It's the unbanked that there are other applications, but there are core needs that are not going away, and that the technology can build on as we solve some of the challenges that we've brought up in the conversation today.
And Jessica, you talked mentality of, how do you approach those Bitcoin is dead conversations? Like some of us, this isn't the first time that, you've heard Bitcoin is dead. You've seen the price go up, you've seen the price go down, you've been on kind of both ends of that ride. And I don't know, you kind of get numb to it at this point. And there's a meme that went around that I really enjoy. And it's one of those, 4 pictures, and it's someone buying Bitcoin, and then it shows them underwater, and then it shows them, getting dragged through the mud. And then the 4th one is someone looking at them being like, oh, you bought Bitcoin in 2017. You're so lucky. And they don't understand the trauma that you went through to get from 2017 to now, and hang on to it and not sell it and all of those other things and still be confident in it. I think this is a great understanding that not many people realize. And it's the same to kind of the earlier commentary of like Amber taking first Bitcoin payment in 2013, being like, that's amazing. That must have worked out super well. And like, well, yes, it did. We learned about it. We used it. But like you have to spend it to understand how it works. And you don't just get to hang on to it forever. So just because someone got in a long time ago doesn't mean that they're rolling in A, Bitcoin, B, fiat, or much of anything right now. So it's that piece of, looking back on it now in 2022, as far as 2013, 2015, 2018, and current time, you've seen the price go up and down enough that you're used to the knowledge and you're comfortable with the fact that you believe it will eventually do what we've all thought it's going to do. And to Hunter's point, I think we're really starting to see some awesome real world use cases that we've only been talking about for a long time. And when things went down in Venezuela, there was similar information related to to Bitcoin kind of helping people move out of that current regime and stuff like that. So it's really neat to see the stuff that we've been talking about for so long really come to fruition and have real information out there.
Awesome. So this was I feel like it was very motivating. I'm always excited about Bitcoin, but I hope that everyone who is watching and who is here on the call today feels that, motivation, that excitement over Bitcoin still, and is going to continue to do research and not believe everything you read or hear. So thank you to our CBP committee and Amber for joining today. I so appreciate you all being here, and we will do another live stream coming up soon. So take care. Thank you. And